All right. So a friend asked me to make this video, and it's something I've seen a lot of people struggle with in Hades. And I was trying to think of the best way to do it, and that is not how to get started with the game, but how to take the next step. So let's say you're in a position where you've beaten a Hades run. Maybe you found like one weapon that you really like, and you grinded out. Let's say it was like the bow.
I need my bow.
And you grinded out the bow, and you really like. You beat Hades, and you're at this position where you don't know where to go next. You don't necessarily know how to do like a lot of builds. You don't necessarily know what packs of punishment to add, or you don't know how to take the next step into very consciously like deciding what you kind of want your runs to be. And so I thought I'd make this video and try and like provide a few like helpful hints. I'm not an expert at this game by any means. I have like 32 heated every weapon, and I have a good general idea. And so I'm not going to necessarily walk through like specific builds, like take this weapon, do this, take this, do this. But I do want to kind of go over some, I guess, let's say like fundamental type things. Like in general, perfect example. In general, Zeus as a boon works really well on fast hitting things. So perfect example, Zeus on the gun is great, like on its attack, because Zeus is a flat damage benefit. So when you're thinking about builds, a lot of people, when they start off Hades, and even once they've gotten a few runs, they kind of just take whatever boon shows up and like hope that ends up working, instead of like actively kind of trying to plan the run. So like for instance, lightning strike, it's just a flat 10 lightning damage, and it's chain lightning, so it hits a bunch. But because it's a flat damage boost per attack, it works really well on things that attack fast. For instance, if you were to put it on, let's say, the sword, that would be like an extra 30-40 damage there. Whereas if you put it on the gun, that's an extra, what, 12 times 30, 300, 360? Like, or you get what I'm saying? Or even like fists, you can like pump a bunch of lightning damage in, and it kind of works. Or, for instance, like Chiron's special. This is where on the bow, your special automatically seeks the last bow struck. So it's like boom, boom. Sometimes you gotta let Skelly rest a little. But anything that attacks a lot, Zeus is really good on. Dionysius is really good on. Because Dionysius puts Hangover, and like, perfect example, if you put Hangover on the special of this bow, it automatically hits with 8 arrows. So that's 8 stacks of Hangover that go instantly on him. So there's lots of different builds to do, and that's one of the great things that's about this game. But there are these like overall kind of concepts that can help you when you're trying to like actively think about builds. So like a lot of times when I try and do a build, it's like I'll pick the gun, and I know I want Zeus on the attack, so I'll put his signet on. And a lot of people, when they're first starting, they don't actively plan these things out. They kind of have the certain gods they like, and that they kind of apply that to every weapon. And it's nice to have a general idea of what kind of things work on what guns. So like perfect example, this is just really you gonna give me a hammer when I'm trying to show off the boons. Okay, we get Zeus right away, so I can show y'all what I mean. Give you a very quick example. See, the gun by itself, it's aggressively okay, but you put Zeus attack on it.
I would like none of these.
Even though it's just 10.
All right, Lord Zeus.
You'll see just like the biggest difference, and this is true of any. Because see, look how fast it's going, and it hits everybody That's because there's so many bullets, and it's a Zeus strike per bullet. Dio kind of works the same way, where it like instantly fills up their entire stack, and they start taking a ton of hangover damage. So there's a lot of things, like in general, Zeus and Dio work really well on things that hit a lot. For instance, aspect of Zeus shield. The special aspect of this turns your shield special into a blitz disc. It does this. If you see it pulsing, like every time it pulses, that's it hitting. So when you put the Zeus special on this, boom, 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 and it hits a lot. Same with Dio and a lot of things. Now, I focused a lot on those just to give you a general idea. But then there's other stuff. There's the things like Aphrodite. A lot of new players don't like Aphrodite that much because, especially on low heat, a lot of the benefits don't necessarily materialize as weakness. But for Aphrodite, she has the biggest straight damage boost of any of the gods. So what I mean by that is, if you go look at Aphrodite, her like attack damage and her like special damage of 80%, those can get up super high really quickly. And big damage boosts like that are great on like single big hits. Perfect example, if you wanted to go back to the gun for the example, is the special. The special is 1. So like on the special Zeus, you're adding an extra 10 damage every this long if you don't have hammers. But it's a flat like 60 damage or whatever, 105. 80% on that is a huge damage increase. So the idea of knowing like what kind of boon, you don't necessarily need to have all these specific builds memorized, and you might as you play through more, but understanding that like Athena, Aphrodite, Demeter's got good damage boost, even Artemis, those are really good on like big single hits. I would even say those can be pretty good on like the spear, like it's special. It's like boom, boom. So it's important to understand that these are the kind of things that work, what kind of boons work really well on what kind of things. And I think that's the most important thing when you're really trying out a bunch of different builds and you're trying to find those builds that do a lot of damage. A lot of times when new players start out, they pick whatever random boon's coming, and by the time they get to like third area, Theseus, and even Hades, they're not doing that much damage because they're not consciously thinking and trying to build these type of builds. And you don't need to have them memorized. You just need the basic fundamental of like Zeus, Dio will work on stuff that hits really well. Artemis, Athena, Aphrodite can all work on like big, slow, damaging stuff. Poseidon just gives you a lot of good stuff, but I think it's important to realize what kind of things work well. If you stop and critically think just like a little bit about, you know, that like Zeus is a flat damage per. So like I really like the aspect of Ramabow. If you look at its special, it's like this. Fires like 4 or 5 arrows and they all shoot off. If you put Zeus or Dio or something on this bad boy, it like instantly hits everything and it fires a bunch all at once. So like each of those is a lightning strike. So I think that's the most important part, is not necessarily understanding the very specific boons of each god goes. That comes with playing the game more. But understanding what type of things they work well with in general. And I mean, once you get good at the game, you can do anything. But yeah, the other thing, of course, is if you're halfway through upgrading your mirror, very important, you get a lot of things. This is the general thing I'd kind of try and roll the mirror, but you can like switch it up a little. This one, family favorite maxed out. By the time you're done, you have maxed out, it's just like a 20 to 25% damage boost when you have 4 to 5 gods and you include Hermes. Dark Foresight is like 20% better chance for like boons, hammers, palms, things that are really useful as opposed to like darkness gems. The mirror, there's lots of different ways to do the mirror. I think this is a pretty good basic setup, but I think that's the point I would try and get across. If I can go over anything in this video, this little very quick tutorial. We're not even going to do any runs or anything. It's the idea that, one, everything can be good, but it's gonna be harder if you're not actively trying to make specific things or specific builds. If you don't have an idea of what you want to do ahead of time, you're gonna have to settle for whatever the game gives you. And a lot of times that's not what fits well with the weapon. Like the gun here, Aphrodite on the attack,
Have to reload first.
not that great in my opinion. But Zeus is like, it melts. So you have to have kind of an idea that these gods are what works well with these kind of weapons. Now, there's always exceptions. Nothing I'm saying is law, and there's a lot of specific builds. Like Aspect of Poseidon is a great cast build. When you have this maxed out, your cast does 50% more damage, and your special dislodges. So you can put 3 in here and go boom. And so like, you can build the specific cast build around that using like Athena's cast, Poseidon's cast. And you can get exit wounds from Artemis, so it does like 300, 400 more damage every time you do it. There's lots of very specific builds, but just having a general idea when you're trying to take to the next level, you're trying to get, say, maybe you're trying to get to the 10 clears. I think that's the important knowledge, is what kind of boons work well on what. Like, you don't want Zeus on slow attacks, but Aphrodite on slow attacks is fantastic. And this is just me. This is completely extra. I recommend not, like, unless you're really actively trying to, like, get all the benefits. If you're in a position where you're wanting to challenge yourself, just knock the heat up. So, like, I have done the shield. Wait, which weapon is? Yeah, I have done the shield on 32 heat. You can come back and do it on lower heats if you want, like, the benefits of it. Like, I have done this on 32 heat. If I wanted to crank it up, it'll let me get those benefits again. So if you're feeling like you're in a run, you want to challenge yourself, don't be afraid to just challenge yourself. But I think those are the good basics for how to move from, you've got your first Hades clear, your first couple of Hades clears, but like, you're still just kind of going with what the game gives you. Actively just having like the very base level knowledge of what type of boons work really well on like fast attacks, slow attacks, etc. And then actively going for those, trying to set them up. The final piece of advice I would give is, as you're going through, don't be afraid to look at your codex. If you have this unlocked, I'm on PlayStation, it'll be a different button on PC. It says press the central button for the boon list. So for Zeus, for instance, you kind of get, like, a lot of these you don't need anything for, but as you get down, you'll see on the right they require something. Don't be afraid to look at this list. Like, for instance, with this shield, if I wanted to do this shield
Aegis.
that throws on Blitz Disc, I would want to put Zeus on special. Let's say I wanted to put Zeus on the special. You can look at this list and kind of have a general idea of what you want. Like, double strike on the shield is a fantastic one. It means your lightning bolts have a chance to strike twice. And when you see how much you're hitting and it's lightning every time, you understand that that kind of becomes a really good boon. And so don't be afraid to look at your codex and be like, oh, but if I get this, that means that I'll have what I need to get these. And I think that's having the base knowledge and not being afraid to look at your codex and see what is required for what is a very important part for taking that next step in Hades. If you've beaten Hades, maybe you've gotten credits, but you're wanting to like maybe crank up the heat, maybe go to 10 heat or even 20 or 30 or whatever your aspirations are, and you're finding that there's a hump and you're just throwing runs at it and you don't really understand where it's going, that would be my recommendation, is to really actively think about what kind of boons work well on what, with that base understanding, and then really actively try and make runs and builds that go for it. I don't know if this will be helpful. If it's what triggered the little switch in my mind whenever I was first playing Hades. Is that like I was insisting on playing one way, and then I kind of like rethought about it, and I was like, how about we actively go for things? We try and make builds that we know will do a lot of damage. And I hope this helped you. If you have any questions, feel free to just leave a comment, and I will try and answer them. But I think that's the main trick to trying to take that next step in Hades. Is one, just having the upgrades is good, and then two, just really actively thinking about your builds instead of taking whatever the game gives you, and understanding that this is the kind of thing that does a lot of damage instead of just in the moment, oh, this looks good, I guess I'll take this. Because the more you do that consistently, the more you get to the end of the game and you're not doing what you want to do. And granted, it's a roguelike. They're all luck based. I get it. Sometimes you just don't get the things you want. But I think it's important to understand that kind of information. So, I think that's all I have for this very, very basic, not even intro, but I guess mid-range chime. Just let me know if you have any questions.